Lisa,
Yes, baby girl.
when I grow up, I want to be a menace to society.
Then so shall you be. Hey, this is Lisa Landry. Welcome to A Menace to Society. I'm speaking today with David Wisniewski, whom I'm very glad to sit down with. Tell us about what you're doing out here to make pot legal for Arizonans.
Oh, well, I'm glad you asked. We are collecting signatures for a ballot initiative to bring total cannabis legalization to the 2018 Arizona election ballot.
Total legalization.
Right. What we've been seeing in other states have been incremental regulation, not total legalization. For example, in Colorado, Washington, Oregon, Washington, D.C., you're left with a system where you're taxed at black market prices and arrested simultaneously. It's not doing its part to stop the war on cannabis consumers. So people are still going to prison, still getting arrested underneath these legalization type models. But our initiative, we totally repeal prohibition. The only crimes we have are if you're an adult selling weed to kids 18 and under, it's still a misdemeanor.
Which would make sense.
Right, similar like alcohol, and you can still get a DUI if you're actually impaired. But other than that, everything is dealt with fines. For example, what we're seeing out of Colorado is arrests for white kids have gone down, but arrests for minority kids have gone up, and that's coming out of Denver. And so they're saying it's a complaint-driven basis, but we feel that you shouldn't be arrested or charged with a crime if you're a kid whatsoever who has the pot. If you're a kid that's caught with pot, we believe the arresting agency should send you to your parents, give you a fine, and it's up to your parents to determine what your punishment's going to be.
Yeah. Is that the same thing that happens with booze? Because I didn't even know this was going on.
Well, you can get, I think, a misdemeanor for selling booze to a kid.
Okay.
And you can get minor in consumption of alcohol, get some community service, but you're not going to be thrown in prison for possession of marijuana or alcohol. You will with marijuana right now.
Are you kidding me?
Kids get hit with felonies.
I had no idea. Like, we're talking like 17, 16-year-olds who were smoking.
Right.
Get
I was 17
caught.
years old and I was caught, and I was looking at graduating high school as a triple felon. And so had I gotten those felonies, I would have done prison time right after high school for marijuana. But I went through their drug diversion programs and paid all the fines and
You
got
kissed some butt and petted some drug-sniffing dogs.
Yeah, I got it dismissed, but still.
But you were fortunate. So is that what encouraged you to do this?
Yeah, well, that was one of the things that kind of triggered my initial curiosity, because if you want to get into that story, how I became an activist.
Yeah.
I was arrested when I was 17, and then eventually I joined the military. I was in the Army, and I was working on some military police officers' Humvees over in Iraq. And we all talked about the different drugs we did before joining the Army. And I was telling people in Arizona, they tried to ruin my life over pot. They tried to make me a multiple felon as a kid. And these guys were from California, and they're like, hey, well, over here it's just a ticket or a fine for the same thing. And I'm like, your state borders my state. Aren't you just like 400 miles to the left? What does California know that Arizona doesn't know? So over in Iraq, I was doing all this research on cannabis prohibition history, figure out what happened. Why is it this way to begin with?
Well, wait, let's stop right there, because I want to know, why is it this way to begin with?
Well, the prohibition of marijuana, it's all economic. They want to get cannabis off the competing market for its industrial purposes. Medicine, oil, power. These are all the big industries that run our planet.
Mm-hmm.
Big oil, big pharma, big energy. And we have a self-sustaining plant that we can all produce relatively cheap and easy. The big elites don't want us to be self-sustainable. Instead, they want us to buy their fossil fuels, their finite fuel source. They want to poison us every step along the way as we're trying to get better when we're dealing with pharmaceuticals. They want to be able to charge us per kilowatt hour when we can have essentially free energy. So these are the industries that saw what cannabis was 80, 90, 100 years ago and started lobbying for its prohibition, and was ultimately successful.
Right, like the 30s, right?
Right, and then we have even more peripheral industries trying to keep it illegal now. The prison industrial complex, that's a huge cash cow for Arizona. People talk about all the different...
Oh yeah, your state especially.
Yeah.
Right?
People want to brag about the money being made from legalization, but there's just that much or even more on the prohibition side of things, trying to keep it illegal. You end up fueling a huge black market. It's a low-hanging fruit for cops to mess with cannabis consumers. It's easy for them.
Yeah, because you can smell us coming.
Yeah, and it stays in your system a lot longer.
We're standing in line at the drive-thru.
Yeah.
I'm hungry.
And cannabis consumers are typically more passive. They're easier to arrest. It's not like we're belligerent. We're just like, oh.
We don't freak out and try to kill the
away.
officer.
Yeah.
We're just like, okay.
We're little sweethearts in handcuffs. That's all we are.
Do you have a chocolate?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so cool. So you're over there. I didn't mean to take you away from all that. There's such a lot of information. It's good to sit down and talk with you because you are so knowledgeable, and I don't think a lot of people are, about how this plant became illegal in the 30s because it was such a threat to all these new resource generating peoples.
Yeah. And once you start realizing that it's helping people and saves people's lives, and the prohibition was a fraud to begin with, then you start to get a little bit angry and realizing that people are getting their lives destroyed over this. You have people who are going to prison on that side, but then you also have the people deprived of life-saving medicine on this side.
Right.
And then you got the sick and dying people being thrown in prison, and then you're like, okay, we're being oppressed, we're being victimized, we need to do something about this.
Right.
And you do what you can. I mean, we're not all rich and famous and have millions of dollars to fund huge campaigns, but we're all got our cell phones and we've all got cameras, and we can broadcast to each other and get a big enough momentum going to make some noise and get some attention on the topic.
Right? Cast your net for your star seeds.
Yeah, whatever that means.
So is that what you're doing here? That's a lot of what you're doing. I've noticed that a lot of your focus is on a grassroots campaign to get petitions signed.
Right.
And to meet people locally in different cities across the state. What gave you that idea that would work? Because it seems to be working.
So what gave me the idea is I saw it happening in Washington. So I was in the Army in Iraq. I was researching cannabis prohibition history and hemp and medical benefits of cannabis, and I had to re-enlist because my contract was weird in a way where I was deployable for all 8 years. So I re-enlisted to go to a place where they were doing something with the movement, and I saw a picture on the internet. It was MySpace at the time when I was over in Iraq. And it said legalized 2011, and it had a picture of Washington with a fat pot leaf right over Tacoma. I'm like, I'm going to re-enlist to go there. Those guys are doing something with the movement. And so I moved to Washington, and they're trying to get an initiative on the 2011 election ballot. And they're grassroots, and they were getting signatures, having protests. There was a man I saw up there, his name was Jared Alloway, and he was distributing this t-shirt that said marijuana is safer than alcohol. I thought that was pretty cool. They didn't get on the ballot in 2011. They tried again in 2012, and they didn't get on the ballot in 2012. However, there was a corporate initiative called New Approach Washington, backed by the Marijuana Policy Project, the Drug Policy Alliance, and they ended up making the ballot. However, the activists out there did not like that initiative, as it was supposed to destroy the medical program, and it wasn't real legalization. So there was a big vote no coming out of cannabis consumers in Washington at that time.
I want to stop you right there. Like, what was the reason that they didn't want to do it?
Well, I'm not 100% sure on all the details, but from my recollection, it was essentially limits. They still had crimes within consumer level activity.
Okay.
And people felt like it was more jail bait than actual meaningful reform.
Legalization.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Similar, people were tripping over that with Prop 205 here in Arizona. But so I saw him collecting signatures.
Yeah.
And then I ended up going to South Korea. I get orders to South Korea, Pyeongtaek. I was at Camp Humphreys for 17 months. And I wasn't thinking of starting any sort of activist group while I was still in the Army. But Jared sends me a safer shirt to South Korea, one that says marijuana safer than alcohol, and I wear it home on my mid-tour leave.
Nice.
And so I come home for 2 weeks, but before I come back to Arizona, I stop and see my sister in California. She takes me to a concert called Coachella. Pretty awesome. There was like 80,000 people there.
Wow.
And I wear this safer shirt there all 3 days, and I was a celebrity just for wearing this t-shirt. People were giving me high fives, thumbs ups. People were blogging about me.
Cool.
There was a power shirt because people know generally that marijuana is safer than alcohol. Why are we arresting people for what's safer? Well, I come back on my mid-tour leave, and I'm a sergeant. I'm a leader of soldiers. It's my job to train and discipline soldiers when they end up doing something wrong. And we have this briefing called War Horse Day, where our sergeant major is giving us pretty much a safety briefing for the month. You know, don't drink and drive, don't beat your spouse, don't beat your dog, all normal stuff.
Common sense.
Yeah, they start talking about drugs, and the sergeant major tells us that we have to prosecute our soldiers on a uniform code of military justice if we catch them drinking purgatory vodka. Why? Because purgatory vodka contained hemp seed oil, and that stuff's bad for you. That's related to marijuana. That's what the sergeant major said. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
So I start freaking out. I'm like, okay, I've done all this research on cannabis, and you're telling me, as a sergeant, to prosecute my subordinates, people who've swore an oath that said they'd die for their country, and they probably have a deployment or even multiple deployments, you want me to take away their benefits and ruin their military career because they drank vodka that had hemp seed oil in it. And I got so pissed. That was my snapping point. And so I'm like, all right, I don't even care if I'm still in the Army. I'm making some money. I'm going to contact my friends in Washington and contact my friends in Arizona and try to see if I can get this whole safer shirt movement to be moved to Arizona and get a bunch of these protest wearing t-shirt people. And I worked because I'm like, look, they're already doing it in Washington. I was finding people, finding my target audience, Arizonans who supported cannabis. It wasn't too difficult on Facebook. I just looked and saw marijuana pages in Arizona and started friending people who liked their post, you know?
Right on.
So then I'm like, okay, well, I remember in Washington they were collecting signatures for something. So maybe there's something in Arizona they could be doing. I contacted Phoenix Normal, the only advocacy group I knew of at the time, and they said, well, we're all waiting for 2016 because the Marijuana Policy Project is going to come save the day. But there's a guy named Dennis Bulkey, and he's putting in an initiative for 2014. And so I linked up with Dennis Bulkey, and we teamed up and called the whole campaign Safer Arizona. So we tried to get on the 2014 election ballot, and since then, Safe Arizona had been associated with a ballot initiative. But then we didn't make the ballot in 2014. 2016 was coming around, and we were negotiating with the Marijuana Policy Project for 6 months. We were telling them the things they had to include, otherwise their initiative is going to fail because people are pissed off at the Marijuana Policy Project because we have the 25-mile rule. Are you familiar with that at all?
I don't know how it works in your state, so tell me.
Well, you live from Nevada?
Yeah.
Well, you're going to become familiar with it because Nevada has a 25-mile rule for adult use, and essentially, you in Arizona, if you're a patient, you can cultivate 12 marijuana plants. Unless you live within 25 miles of an operating dispensary. So in the beginning of Prop 203, our medical program, it was a marijuana wonderland. Jan Brewer had stopped the dispensaries from popping up for a couple of years, so everyone had their grow rights. Yeah, and it was great. People were gifting weed. I wasn't here, I was in the Army, but I was heard all the great fantasy stories of this.
It was a Fantasia.
Yeah, I was like, oh man. But then the dispensary started popping up, and then boom, 25-mile radius, 50 miles in diameter across. Everyone in that radius is now felonized again if they continued to do what it was just legal for them to do.
Yeah. And
so people got upset. They were returning and reselling their lights. Patients were getting busted again, and the war was just brought back. And in Nevada, they gave you guys a 25-mile rule for adult use. And so you guys, if you want home cultivation, you need to legalize marijuana again in your state.
We've got some weird loopholes, as I'm being told, in Nevada. We just ran out of pot.
Yeah.
We legalized it for recreational as well as medical, like July 1st, and we ran out. And there's a state of emergency in my state.
There's
declared by the governor.
Essentially three types of people that I've recognized that are trying to legalize cannabis. There's your investors who just want to make money, and that's all they're concerned about. There's your people who are trying to stop the war and save people's lives. That's all they're concerned about. And there's people who want to make money and save people's lives.
Yeah. And
so that's kind of like the middle ground. But a lot of times your far lefts and your far rights, they're not going to get along. And you can see that when it comes to these ballot initiatives. They start writing in these provisions that are all about making money.
Well, who does that? Is that Big Pharma? Is that the state?
Well, in the case
growers?
of ballot initiatives, it's Marijuana Policy Project and investors. The there's two big companies that are going around state to state changing marijuana laws. You have the Marijuana Policy Project and you have the Drug Policy Alliance. And sometimes they team up and they both fund initiatives, but they both have their basic template. So they go to the state, and for Arizona, for example, they went to a bunch of dispensaries, the industry. They said, we're going to push this law, but if you want to have priority or if you want to influence it, give us a bunch of money and we'll let you rewrite this how you want it. Yeah, and so the MPP, I think, threw like $50,000, but the dispensaries threw in a lot more, and they wrote felony enforced monopoly for a small group of wealthy dispensary owners here in Arizona. And
what does that mean? Can you break that down?
Well, it's a limited market designed to benefit just a group of people. So, for example, right now, smoke shops, it's a free market. Anybody can get a license, a transaction privilege license, and start selling tobacco. You can start selling pipe. You just got to make sure that you're selling to people over 18. But essentially, it's a free market. But what Prop 205 was doing was they were allowing for just 150 licenses. Keep in mind, we already have 130 licenses.
Right.
So they were only allowing for 20 more licenses under recreation than we had under medical.
That's horrible.
And you're looking to
How are you going to serve people?
You're not going to serve people, and that's the problem. Arizona is we have issues where dispensaries are getting busted buying pot from the black market. So how are you going to tell me legalization is to stop black market sales when these legal entities are buying weed off the black market anyways? And if you're going to say, okay, we've got 100,000 patients potentially going up to 200, 300, maybe 500,000 overnight, and you giving us no meaningful increase in availability, what do you expect is going to happen to the black market? Well, that's going to explode. And that black market, well, you kept a felony there, so there's still risk involved, and the street prices are kept high, so you can keep your retail price high. So that's another reason they're not repealing prohibition, so they can charge more in the stores.
Right. Okay, so is that what you think is happening in Nevada? Is that why the government called in a state of emergency to keep this from happening?
Well, the state of emergency, I'm hoping it's a good thing. What they need to do is figure out a way to open up a lot more pot stores real fast and get pot to a lot of people. Because what the emergency is going to end up being is the enforcement of people going to the black market to get their buds. It's still a felony in Nevada if you don't go to a dispensary. So now you have everybody legal to get it. Now there's that you're enticed to go I want to get this. It's legal for me to have it. Just the act of getting it,
well, hell
it's
like
illegal.
one of our senators was one of the first people in line.
Yeah.
And
he
for the thrill of it.
Now
maybe.
it's
Who
out.
Knows? Who knows?
Probably threw it away. I don't know how to use this. Marijuana's.
Do you inhale it? I don't know.
Yeah, we need more availability, most definitely. And what our initiative does, it's a totally open free market. Anybody who gets a transaction privilege tax license can start selling cannabis, and you're going to have to survive on your own merits rather than having the government go arrest your perceived competition at gunpoint and throwing them in jail. Because that's what happens here in Arizona. Dispensaries are known for calling the cops on when we used to have farmers markets and caregivers and even patients. Because they don't want the perceived competition. But they have to realize they're already competing with the black market. People still go to the black market for lots of different reasons, and these guys are still making a killing with the black market still existing, so they don't need to fear a free market. They just need to figure out a way to work with it.
Right. Well, good luck with that, right? Cooperation?
Yeah, and there's a handful of dispensaries that are on board. There's just a tiny few that want to keep their current monopoly, and they don't support what we're doing.
That's greedy.
It is greedy.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't think they've come out in public yet, because they can try, but if they're going to come out against legalization because it's affecting their bottom line, then it makes them look greedy. It doesn't look good to come out at someone like that in the first place.
Yeah, because you're still going to make your money anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, people are going to want to get high. And do you feel it's beneficial for you as a veteran, and thank you for your service, by the way, do you think it's beneficial to be able to smoke pot?
Oh, yeah. The whole veteran thing has kind of helped me out in a lot of ways. I feel like I had to join the military because if I hadn't joined the military, I hadn't experienced what I've experienced. One, I'm not sure if I'd be an activist because, I was arrested and everything, but it wasn't until I was told to prosecute someone for hemp that it really irked me.
It's full circle.
Yeah, I became the enforcer at that point in time, and not even for pot. I get goosebumps talking about it because I get so angry, but they wanted me to destroy someone's life over hemp. That's not even contraband for us here in America.
Right.
We can go to Sprouts and buy it. Imagine getting fired from work for buying hemp seed at Sprouts, and
Or like a hemp lotion.
and then you couldn't get jobs again, and you couldn't get, and everyone said you're a shitbag for the rest of your life because of hemp. Because that's what happens when you get kicked out with like a general discharge. You're essentially on paper a shitbag for life.
Wow. And then you can't have your benefits, right?
Right, and you don't get your benefits. So
you lose
could,
everything.
You could be disabled, you could have PTSD, but the government said all that because of hemp. So it'll get when you are versed and educated on cannabis, and you see the establishment trying to do that to people, it kind of gets you upset, and it's like the fire that fuels activism. At least it is with me. I've noticed a lot of people who are activists didn't wake up one day and they're like, I'm going to be an activist. But they usually had to go through a series of extraordinary events. A lot of times people had gotten arrested, put through the system. Sometimes they've had their friends and family killed, their heads blown off in front of their faces because cops got scared of some plants and started killing people. Or a flashbang coming in, blowing up babies' cribs. These things happen.
It's so weird to me how this, like, just say no, the war on drugs, all this propaganda has become so, or was so prevalent. I don't think it is anymore. But for the generations before us, it really does seem like this plant is so evil. Like,
well, they put a lot of money in, and the way information was spread was a lot slower back then, so people didn't have the time and the resources to catch up to reality. They were just told by the government all this crazy stuff, but now you can fact check anybody in 2 seconds, and no, that's BS. Internet told me so.
I'm not believing it. I read online something different's happening. So do you have, I don't want to ask too personal of a question. I would imagine that you have a medical card here. I don't know how hard they are to get in your state. Like, I got my first card in California because I had certain things that qualified me for the card. But in California, I think it's easier than some states to find a medical practitioner who will recommend marijuana to you.
Well, Arizona, it's really easy, but it's really hard at the same time. It's hard because it's the most expensive in the nation. You're going to spend about $300 for your card.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to get because anybody can walk into a certification center, pay an extra $50 and get certified for back pain without any medical records. All you have to do is complain about pain before you touch your toes and give them a good backstory, and you are in. So I kind of like that aspect. You got your prohibitionists being like, oh, these potheads are just trying to abuse it for back pain, and they don't really have back pain. And okay, I see where they're coming from. We do have a program that seems to cater towards recreational rather than medical for a couple of things. We don't have home cultivation. We're paying top price for untested mid-grade bud. And
why is that?
Well, there's a handful of theories. It's a lack of standards, and there's no benchmark for these growers to really compare their own work to. And from what I also understand is a lot of times they're growing crops, different strains in the same room right next to each other, and they're cross-pollinating. So you end up with like in paint where you start throwing a bunch of shit and you end up with brown.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're getting with our medical marijuana. It's all brown.
Oh, that's not good.
It still gets you
I mean,
high.
it's still good, but like I mean, like, you know, as somebody, like, I prefer my certain strains. As a patient, I don't mean to be like, that's not good, but it would be confusing to go into your dispensary thinking that you're getting this certain strain that does.
Well, it's already confusing because they don't test per plant, they test per batch, and so anytime they tell you THC potency percentage, I don't think you can ever really believe them.
Right.
And a lot of times they got these prices of these different tiers, and they don't know what they're testing. They don't know what they have every time. So a lot of times you'll buy their bottom tier, and it might be more potent than their top tier because this one looks prettier, so let's sell it for a little bit more. So there were those people who just want to get high, and for me that's just fine. But there's also people who are in my position. I've got a couple of qualifying conditions: back pain and combat PTSD.
Yeah.
However, to get it for PTSD is all these different loopholes that you have to jump through, and so it's just much more of a pain in the ass to get it for PTSD. So I got it for back pain, and I'm sure there's so many other people that have conditions that cannabis helps, but it's not a qualifying condition, so they get it for back pain instead.
Yeah, it varies state to state. I was surprised by that because I have insomnia, and in one state where I live, that was recognized as a qualifying condition, and in another state where I live, that it's not even
Yeah,
there.
it is state by state, and that kind of goes back to what you were talking about before, who writes these laws. And when it goes to ballot initiatives, like I said before, it's typically investors, but in this case, we're grassroots, and the community, we're our stakeholders, our investors. They're the ones giving us our $10, $20, $30 donations here and there. And so we put out our draft for 6 or 7 months publicly, and we got input from the community. And so that's how we ended up with our draft, is what is the cannabis consuming, the educated
the
cannabis
actual
consumer.
public want. What does the voter want?
Yeah,
Kinda, is that-
well, it's the voter wants legalization, and a lot of times they don't necessarily go into how many plants or how many ounces are you supposed to get. One of the big downfalls of Prop 205 is the claims they were making versus their payout. And we're not trying to make a claim that we can't pay out. Prop 205 called themselves Campaign to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol, but they only gave you 1 ounce. Imagine if they legalized 1 ounce of alcohol. That'd be 1 ounce of beer. And we're not even talking about concentrates. We're saying 1 ounce is legal. Well, that's just 1/12 of a cup. If you're going to regulate marijuana like alcohol, why can't I buy a semi-truck full of kegs of marijuana? I can buy a semi-truck full of kegs of alcohol, of
Right.
vodka, if I want to. And another thing is they let you have 5 grams of concentrates, but 5.1 grams was a narcotics felony.
Oh, jeez.
And so we're sitting here saying 5.1 grams of concentrates is well within consumer level.
Yeah.
You're still, in a sense, forcing people to have to get their card. And like we were saying earlier, this program's not even really benefiting patients. It's benefiting mostly recreational users. And a lot of patients do get relief, but an actual program that's effectively saving people's lives, you need home cultivation of a larger amount. You need to have buds where you can get.
You need testing.
You need testing for
Yeah.
sure, but you also need a lot of really cheap, easily accessible buds to actually save people's lives so you could make the oils, the RSO. And our medical program really doesn't offer that much. I mean, you can get a gram of RSO for like $40, but if you're dying of cancer, that's still not going to be enough to save your life.
Yeah. It seems like it seems so convoluted.
Yeah, so when you got all this crazy money involved, people end up writing these laws that end up just benefiting a tiny few. But citizens are catching on. Ohio did the same thing.
Yeah, I saw that.
They had a monopoly that was a little bit more obvious than the one in Arizona. They were trying to have 10 growers for the whole state, and then like one guy was going to have half those licenses.
What is that? That's just ridiculous to think that people are that desperate to smoke pot.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They're
Yeah.
they're trying to call out people for their desperity. Is that the right word? Is they think we're
you can
so
say whatever
desperate.
word you want.
They think we're so desperate, and they think they can just put whatever they want on, and it'll automatically pass because it's
Right.
marijuana legalization. That's not the case, and we're hoping that we're not going the opposite direction of too much freedom. But we believe that this is what Arizonans want. They don't want a restricted, monopolistic, authoritarian style pot system. They want free market. They want legalization.
Oh yeah, this is Wild Wild West out here.
Yeah. People should be able to go to their grocery stores and buy pot next to their tobacco and beer.
Yeah.
There doesn't have to be.
And be able to carry a gun inside at the same time.
Yes.
Concealed.
Without having special dispensaries.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Yeah, so that's what we're
I guess
pushing
that's
for.
the goal, right?
And we're getting signatures for it.
So how many signatures do you need?
We need 150,000, and right now we only about have 9,000.
You have 9,000, and you have to get this done by 2018?
Yeah, we have about 1 year left.
You have 1 year. That's a lot of math, and I'm a little medicated.
Well, if we go at the rate we're going, we're not going to make it. We need to pick up the pace, that's for sure. And so there's other ways that people are trying to change laws. There's also our legislature. There's a guy named Mark Cardenas who puts in a bill every year. It never goes anywhere because most of our government hates marijuana. Our government hates marijuana in Arizona so much that they are literally attacking our Constitution specifically to prevent us from legalizing cannabis. And they're trying to make the initiative process much more difficult. And there's this other grassroots organization called Refer 2404, which is trying to get their decision to mess up the citizens process onto the November 18 election ballot so Arizona citizens can vote yes or no if they want to get our Constitution changed rather than having our lawmakers just do it for us and make it harder for us to legalize pot.
Okay, let me get that right. You are having to have other attorneys come in to make sure that you get a new constitution?
Well,
because they won't just ratify what's already on the book?
Our Arizona Constitution allows us to conduct ballot initiatives to petition a government so we can vote on new laws.
Okay.
And so that's our constitutional right, and our government is trying to amend those provisions to where it's a lot more strict in the ballot initiative process, and paying people is a lot more pain in the ass.
Right.
So
because you have to raise legal fees and filing fees and all that stuff.
Well,
right?
and
but right now you don't.
Yeah.
From what I understand.
Well, they're trying to make it easier for us to get sued, and to where it's going to end up costing us a lot more money, and it's essentially making it impossible for grassroots to be able to do it. They're even making it almost impossible for huge corporations to be able to do it. You essentially need to be a multi-millionaire
to affect change.
Yeah, to affect change in Arizona. That's what they're trying to make it. So we've teamed up with another group called Refer 2404, and we're collecting signatures to defer that law to a ballot vote, so Arizona can choose to say no to that crappy law, and we can continue pushing citizens initiatives further on.
Right.
But those are the people that can also change our law, those people who are trying to prevent us from legalizing pot. So I don't have any faith in our government for legalization. I think we're going to have to do grassroots in Arizona.
Yeah. So you need a lot more signatures. So how could people get involved if they don't live in Arizona? Can they do anything to help you?
If they don't live in Arizona, they can contribute financially at saferarizona.com. We have a donate button. But if you do live in Arizona, we have a group on Facebook called Safer Arizona. It's got like 17,000 people in it, and it's where you can instantly connect to our campaign throughout the whole state, and get a hold of our county coordinators, and we'll provide you with petitions, and you can go into your own community and start collecting signatures and help us make the ballot.
I saw that y'all are going door to door. Is that right?
Some people are. I haven't been going door to door, and anybody who does, I'm going to applaud them.
It's freaking hot here.
Yeah, I applaud people who do stuff like that.
So do you reach out to any of the colleges here, like ASU or University of Arizona?
We reach out to students and stuff, but not so much. There was kind of like a rift last year between people who supported Prop 205 and people who didn't, and that kind of like ruined some relationships between a couple. There was Students for Sensible Drug Policy at ASU. And,
that's ironic.
And we were all cool in the 2014 campaign, but then Prop 205 comes around, and because we weren't fully in support of it, they kind of cut ties with us.
Oh, they thought y'all were blocking the legalization?
Yeah, but they blocked their own legalization. Prop 205, I'm not trying to bring it up, but it keeps being brought back up. It was, in my opinion, felony enforced, corporatized. It's a felony enforced corporatized oligopoly for a small group of wealthy dispensary owners that had fake home cultivation. They said you can have 6 plants, but they allowed our cities to ban those 6 plants right away if they wanted to. They were only giving us 20 more dispensaries, and everyone can carry an ounce, that's cool, but they had all these felonies within consumer level activity, so it wasn't any better than our medical program. As a matter of fact, it was worse than our medical program.
It would just help the police and the prison system? Maybe?
It would have helped definitely the prison system, because the only thing they were really making legal was possession of 1 ounce or less, and simple possession is anything under 2 pounds, so they weren't even making all of simple possession legal, just the bottom part of simple possession. And people don't typically go to prison for simple possession. They get drug diversion, they go to task, they get a slap on the wrist. The very worst, maybe they'll get a misdemeanor, even though they're arrested a felony at the point of arrest. However, the laws that actually put people in prison for prolonged periods of times were all kept felonies. And so when you have, and that's pretty much sales and cultivation. And so when you have no home cultivation left, and you have artificially inflated prices with no meaningful availability, people are going to turn to the black market.
Right.
And that black market, it still has all the felonies, and Prop 205 created more cops. They created a special marijuana task force.
Are you kidding me?
I'm
I didn't
dead
know about
serious.
that.
And their job,
The Green Police?
I don't know if that's what they're called, but their job was to hunt down cannabis consumers and prosecute them for cannabis crimes under legalization, and the crimes they were tasked out to go find were sales and cultivation.
Oh no.
It was their job to put people in prison for marijuana felonies.
So of course this would resonate badly with you for, your life story with the
Yeah, and
Yeah,
so
what you've been through.
I'm the guy over here trying to stop the war and save people's lives, and you've got these investors who just want to make money, and then you have all these other people who are in the middle who are like, man, I really don't like this, but it's better than nothing
Right.
now, and it's going to help me out. I'm not a grower, so what do I care? I'll vote
Right.
yes. It wasn't just about just a couple of joints and getting high. I think that's an ironic pitch, because people were getting upset at us, saying that we're the stoners and all we wanted to do was just get high. But they're the ones saying all I want to do is smoke a couple of joints and not
Right.
get caught.
They're not thinking about long term.
Yeah, I'm thinking about people who have to grow the plants, people who
Yeah.
have to make the RSO, and the rest of the population that wants to be able to get into the industry without having to win a lottery for a dispensary. You literally have to win a lottery to be a dispensary owner here.
How much does it cost to get started here with a dispensary?
Well, from what I understand, for just the ticket, it's $5,000, and you need to already have your property set up and zoned, and the approval from the landlord to have a dispensary. So there's like hundreds of thousands of
Yeah.
backdoor work,
Yeah.
and then you get your $5,000 license, and then or lottery ticket. Then you have to win,
Yeah.
and if you don't win, you just got this set up for, I don't know, you can open up a barbershop or something.
Consolation prize.
Yeah.
So what did I want to ask? Oh, this group that you were working with in the past, what's the name of it again?
Well, I was referring to the group called Refer 2404, and that's the group we're working with currently.
Okay.
And we also work with the Phoenix Cannabis Coalition, and that's the group that's going to be having an event here tonight in about, well, it's supposed to be 40 minutes from now.
Oh, okay.
And it's another activist group. They go do court support when people get arrested and need to have a show of force in the courtroom.
How does that work?
Well, they follow them on Facebook, and they put out dates and locations of where the court case is and who the person is and what the story behind it is. And we just encourage everyone to come to support them and sit in the courtroom in support of that person going through the marijuana trial.
So how many people show up on average to support that person?
It varies. I've seen anywhere from like 10 to 30 people.
Does it work?
Oh yeah, and especially when everyone stands up at the same time, or if they're all wearing a little ribbon to show solidarity, it's actually kind of intimidating. Intimidates the legal system.
To do the right thing.
Yeah, and they even sometimes try
Justly.
to reschedule or advise people not to show up because it freaks them out.
Who?
It freaks the court people out, the judges, the plaintiffs.
Well, I'm sorry that they're getting freaked out. I would like to think they want to do the right thing just by virtue of being righteous.
Yeah, getting arrested freaks people out too.
Yeah, it's an unpleasant experience. I don't think a lot of people look forward to that. How many times have you been arrested?
3 times.
Yeah. When you were 17.
Yeah, so it was first time it was 16. It was for shoplifting vodka. Actually, it was 4 times I was arrested. Second time I was 17 for pot. The third time I was 18 for pot. That was the third time. The fourth time was because since I was arrested twice, really close to each other for pot, they tried to hem me up with this weird program, and I didn't want to be a part of it, so I wasn't cooperating with the cop, and they put out a warrant for my arrest for not doing the little court system. And so the fourth time I got arrested was for a warrant for pot. It wasn't actually.
How'd you get a bench warrant? Because you didn't show up?
Essentially,
Okay.
yeah. So, but it was still pot related.
Got it.
Yeah,
Got it.
still arrested. And that time was funny because I hadn't been smoking, and the cop tried to accuse me of being high, and I wasn't. And then I found out that having lazy eye trips up their little pen test.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, they thought
so
I was.
You failed on a technicality?
Yeah, they thought I was drunk. That was the thing.
Oh, my
Because
gosh.
I got a lazy eye.
No, cops can be vicious here. I was on the I-10 in 2016 or 2015. I was coming back from a gig in Tucson, and I got pulled over for driving too slowly on the I-10.
Were you high?
No, but that's what the cop thought. And I was like, no, I'm just driving slowly. And he was like, we have all these pileups on this highway. And I'm thinking like, yeah, because y'all drive too freaking fast. Because I have a lot of family and friends that I love here, so I spend a lot of time in Arizona. And he got me out the car. He wanted to know what I did, and I'm a comedian. Oh, let me see your license. And then he's like asking me all these questions, and he had me out the car, and he was gonna put his drug sniffing dog through my car because I was nervous.
Yeah, that's how they try to get you.
And I was like, why would I not be nervous? And he's like, why would you be nervous if you're not breaking any laws? I'm like, do you watch TV? I mean, like, you got a drug sniffing dog, and I'm not doing anything wrong. It's the middle of the daytime, and I'm telling you I'm on my way to Sedona to have a friggin' veggie taco. I shouldn't have said I was on my way to Sedona.
Well, that sucks.
But the cops here are mean. Where did you get arrested? Did you get arrested in Arizona?
Yeah, it was Chandler every time.
Every time?
Mm-hmm.
Chandler, huh? So you just stay out of Chandler now?
No. I just drive in the slow lane.
On my bicycle with my helmet.
And I have a medical card, so I try not to even drive with my car smelling like weed anyways.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to get searched. But also knowing your rights, cops can't just put a dog in your car. You have to authorize a search.
Yeah.
And so in Arizona...
But if you say no, don't they go harder?
Yeah, that's you have to go harder back.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're going to violate your rights, and you're going to have let them do it.
Yeah.
And every single time I've let them violate my rights, I didn't know till later, I let them search my car with a dog before I knew I could say no.
Yeah.
I thought you had to say yes, but you know what? People got to learn these things. Yeah.
Including you. But you're here telling them about it now. So if people live in Arizona, they can go to saferarizona.com.
.com. And our initiative is essentially it's the bee's knees of ballot initiatives for cannabis because unlike these other laws that just put a law on top of prohibition and let all the penalties fall back onto your felony arrest, we totally repeal prohibition altogether. We've also got gun rights, so you can have a gun and marijuana and you're not considered an extra felon. You're not going to get an extra felony for that.
I'm so moving here.
Yeah, well, we have to get this thing passed. Another thing that we got that other states don't have, we have post-conviction relief in our initiative.
What is that? Tell people what that is.
Post-conviction relief is a provision in our initiative that allows people who are in prison right now for nonviolent marijuana crimes to apply to be resentenced under the new law. And if under the new law what they've done is not a crime, they'll be released from prison. Similarly, we've got post-expungement relief. So if you've got a marijuana felony on your record, you can apply to get that expunged and taken off your record. So once it's all legal, I'm not getting oppressed from getting a job or an apartment or a loan or a school for a marijuana felony when everyone else can do it freely.
Right. That's awesome. That's like retroactive justice for potheads.
Yeah. Well, we're just asking for equality. We're not asking for any special privileges.
You're not asking for reparations?
I wish. Government pay us all back money. Arizona goes bankrupt overnight. But the citizens have lots of money.
That would be pretty idyllic. So that's cool that you're doing all this stuff, and it's awesome to find out that this might be one of the last times where Arizonans actually had the chance to have a ballot initiative created by its fellow citizens instead of a corporation, more than usual.
We got to keep pushing because we may or may not make the ballot. It may or may not pass if we do make the ballot. So worst case scenario that we're successful and it fails on the ballot, we don't want to sit here and be like, oh no, that was our last chance. So you got to keep motivating people. Personally, I'm probably going to take a break and focus on my career, and if it doesn't end up working out for 2018. But
yeah, you've been pushing for a while now.
Yeah, I'm kind of exhausted.
How many years have you been doing this?
Since July 2013.
Yeah.
So like 4 years, I think.
And going hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully you'll make it this time.
Yeah, that's what we're working on. We need more help, especially the signature collecting area. We just need a bunch more volunteers and getting our people out at events. I mean, events are pretty awesome. It's where we get our like heavy powerhouse signature collecting days.
Yeah.
It's not so much wandering around.
Are people are they happy when you walk up to them to talk about this stuff, Arizonans?
Oh yeah, it's mixed. You get people who are happy, and then you get people who look at your T-shirt that says marijuana is safer than alcohol, and they're like, I don't agree with that. And they're usually like an older generation.
You know that blows my mind because it goes back to the propaganda that we heard. You know how awful this is, and it's an evil weed, and you're going to destroy your life, and you know this is your brain on drugs, and all that other kind of stuff. I would reckon has a lot to do with it. But it's funny to me because I have so many friends and family members on the East Coast, and they have no idea of the medical benefits of this. So while I think they're more open than they used to be, they still don't understand. If you have ADD, you can smoke this strain and focus. If you have chronic pain in your back, you can smoke this instead of taking pills, and you are comfortable. if you have, for instance, PTSD, you're not going to be as triggered by stuff if you take a few tokes, but you don't have to take all this other pharmaceutical drugs that give you all these horrible side effects, including suicidal thoughts, especially when PTSD is, oftentimes people have suicidal thoughts who are suffering through that.
Yeah, that's why I don't want to take their pills. I'm like, you're trying to give me pills that make me want to kill myself. Why do I want to take that?
Right? So it's going to be a great thing, I think, when the East Coast learns more about what's actually possible.
Well, education's key. I like turning people on to the endocannabinoid system, because once you understand that, it makes more sense why cannabis works at all in the human body.
What is that?
So the endocannabinoid system is a system in all of our bodies, every human body, every mammal body, and it's essentially our own body's system of producing marijuana in our body. Our bodies produce cannabis, and when
I can do that?
Yes. Our bodies produce cannabis, and when it's produced in our body, it's called an endocannabinoid. That's the name of the molecule. When it's produced in marijuana, it's called a phytocannabinoid. So similarly, our bodies produce some vitamins, and we still need to reach out and get them from fruits and vegetables, stuff like that. So our bodies produce an endocannabinoid, and our bodies use these molecules to fight and prevent against diseases and cancers and regulate our cycles and systems. So when we take the molecule from a plant, it's using it in our body the same way as it uses naturally to fight against diseases and cancers. Mm-hmm. So that's an area of research and information sharing is the endocannabinoid system and how it's already produced in our bodies and why it affects us the way it does.
So you're telling me that it cures cancer?
Well, I don't like using the term cure because people like to get sensitive about that word. But from what I understand is it kills cancer cells.
I've read that too.
While leaving healthy cells healthy.
Mm-hmm. And also reverses brain damage.
Yeah, reverses lots of different kinds of brain issues. I've seen it reverse on a microscope Alzheimer's and repair the cells being damaged through Alzheimer's.
Right, and Parkinson's disease. I hear that there's some breakthrough stuff happening.
And they're also discovering that when you're running and getting that runner's high, you're triggering your endocannabinoid system. So your runner's high is actually a lot more in common with your marijuana high than you originally thought.
I knew it all these years. I knew it. I'm so on top of it.
Yeah, so get high, do some push-ups.
So you can do just like the runner's high on the couch.
Yeah.
The couch like runner's high.
Flutter kicks or something.
Rad. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today, Dave. Mm-hmm. I really hope people in Arizona get involved, especially here in Arizona. And people who want to contribute to what you're doing can find you on the website, saferarizona.com. Make a donation. This is a veteran who, I don't know, I have a lot of respect for you when you realize you became the beast you never wanted to be and you turned your back on what you thought was wrong.
Yep.
So thank you for that. A lot of people don't do that. So that's just super cool. And I wish you the best of it.
Well, thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Lisa Landry. I really believe in Dave and Safer Arizona and the great work that organization is doing to lift the pot prohibition in the great state of Arizona. So this week, a portion of all proceeds from my t-shirt sales are going to go directly to Safer Arizona. And if you're in Arizona, please get involved. Just go on to saferarizona.com and sign your name. That's all you got to do to make sure that your state constitution stays intact and that you are able to smoke a flower. And everybody in Arizona, when you're able to hit that legal recreational joint, thank a veteran.